Hi, we've spoke about 1993, so why not jump to another of my fave dossiers, 1996, and see what made those games so special to me. So, same as last time, it's more about why than what they are. I've mentioned it numerous times on this channel, and it's no news for those who've been watching my videos for a while, but Heroes of Might and Magic 2 is my most favorite outing in the whole series. If you somehow managed to never hear about it, which is hard to believe, and I sir deem you a liar, you should better check your pants, cause no doubt they're currently on fire. You can watch me explain it in detail the best way I can, so chaotically and overflowing with cringe, in my earlier video. The link is in the description below. So, I will only cover here superficially, before telling you why it was one of my most favorite games of 1996. Heroes of Might and Magic 2 is a fantasy turn-based strategy with some role-playing elements. It's divided into three parts: town/city management, adventuring map, and combat screens. In first, you build up your defenses and erect buildings, either adding extra functionalities and perks to your kingdom, or allowing you to recruit many different creatures to your armies. On a top-down adventuring map, you explore the world of the game, collect treasures, seek out powerful artifacts, secure mines and resource supplying locations, and most of all, initiate combat with random neutral creatures or opposing players. Well, you can get attacked too, but that's pretty obvious, so shouldn't really require me talking about it. Combat screens are side view and divided into hexes with units populating both sides of them. Attackers on the left and defenders on the right. Units move in turns according to their attribute of speed, and your hero can also cast spells once per turn. It's crucial to have a big army, but many encounters are also won with a correct army composition or smart use of magic. The campaign, or campaigns really, are built out of series of plot-connected maps that are rather fun to go through, but bleak in comparison to how fun hot seat multiplayer games can be. And that is why I fell in love with Heroes of Might and Magic 2. I've played it hundreds of times with different friends and my cousins, and it was always great fun. There was this dude living in the same apartment building when we were kids, and we used to play it daily, like from when we woke up and had our breakfast till late hours at night one summer, and it was bliss. You may think that we've played on many different maps and with different kinds of characters, and for the most part, you're kinda right. At least when it comes to the first half of that summer. But then we somehow discovered a very special map online, Jagged 2. And it's that single map that took us the remainder of that summer. It must have been great if we've replayed it so many times, right? After all, one map can be completed in just a few hours, and if you split 4 weeks in these hours, that means we must have gone through it at least like good dozen of times or so. Well, not really. We've played it maybe 3-4 times tops, and I'm not even sure if we ever managed to complete it. So, what made it such an involving creation? Well, scope, my dear viewer, scope. Not only you started with a few castles and heroes, regardless of which of the colors of a player you've chosen at start, but also nearly every single square of the map's surface was covered with something. Be it resource-providing structures, resources themselves, treasures, artifacts, or tons upon tons of different monsters and enemies. And when I say tons, I mean it. Both in terms of individual units on the map and also number of them in each of the stacks in neutral armies. So, playing through this map could easily take several weeks. I mean, just imagine that having 1000 dragons in an army that your hero led, or 3000 genies, or 40,000 skeletons was nothing out of ordinary, and many encounters, especially between the players farming recruits all over the map, were epic. What's more, we've loaded the map into the editor and converted it without changing anything into Price of Loyalty add-on, which considerably expanded onto the original game's formula and made it even more playable. And we loved every minute of it. Also, it's this map that taught me the upper limit of units in a single stack in Heroes 2, and it's 65,535 if you wondered. And if you cross it, it will reset to 0, effectively killing off all units in that particular stack. Now, that may not be important for most creatures, but skeletons get there quite fast, so it was important to split them up around 60,000 mark. Funny enough, as much as 1000 phoenixes can lay destruction to as many skeletons with just one attack and decimate their numbers considerably, if skeletons manage to hit first, then even with the relatively low power at this number, they were a huge force to be reckoned with. There aren't many games that I remember as fondly as Heroes 2 played endlessly that summer, and hot seat multiplayer, along with Jagged 2 map, made it my fave among all others. The Settlers 2 Veni, Vidi, Vici is a kingdom management game mixed with real-time strategy and an excellent example of how sequels should be made. In fact, it should be used in a game design classes to teach how to make follow-up that's better what it was based on. It is also, at least in my opinion, the very best out of all Settlers games, especially in its gold iteration that included the expansion pack. It can be played as either a series of missions forming a campaign, or in a free mode that allows for complete customization of starting parameters and even playing without any opponents for a relaxing, hassle-free experience. For the most part, it's a game where you create a medieval kingdom of your dreams, brick by brick and plank by plank. And I mean it literally. Your workers actually do have to carry all the necessary materials to where you decided to construct something, then they level the land, and after that start on construction, which you can observe in real time, with them running around the site and hammering those planks together as if there was no tomorrow. Same goes for everything else in the game. So a farmer actually plants crops, waits for them to grow and mature, and then harvests them. Someone else then grabs the grain, delivers it to the mill, where it's made into flour over time, which then is delivered into bakery, and stones and wood also have to be mined and cut from the forest, with either of the two workers actually doing it. And deforestation is a thing in Settlers, so you can actually build a forester's hut for him to plant new trees to offset all the cutting. Settlers 2 is a micromanagement fanatic's dream game, and also hella cute. But before I ever played it, I played the first one, and that's where I really fell in love with the series. I still had my Amiga back then and saw it at a friend's place, who then told me to go home and grab my own mouse so that we could play it in split screen together. It was amazing and I was hooked. And ever since then, I've played it with that friend and alone more times than I could recall. Was I any good at it? To be honest, I wasn't, but to be even more honest, so honest, I didn't care at all. I was having so much fun, it made no difference to me. So when I eventually got my PC, Settlers and Settlers 2 were on my list of priorities, and boy oh boy was second one an upgrade. While I loved charming low-res presentation of the first entry, the second, while retaining all the detail, worked in high resolution and looked like a dreamy diorama. A heavily upgraded and feature-packed diorama, but one nonetheless. And while I've never had a chance to play the second Settlers in hot seat, and frankly I didn't even knew that it had an option at all, until a few years ago, cause you know, I assumed that two mice connected to a single PC would work as one, and it turns out that when one is connected to a PS2 port and another to joystick, they can work independently in Settlers. Who knew? Still, even if alone, I've wasted hundreds of hours in it playing as all four nations of Romans, Nubians, Vikings and Japanese. And despite them realistically only differing in how they looked like, I loved watching all those different buildings being constructed from ground up. Settlers 2 is a game I come back to this very day. I'm no better at it than I was in the past, but I have as much fun, if not more even, and are okay with a casual gameplay of it with a very limited or non-existent even number of opponents just to relax, to treat it as that moment of escapism that all of us crave from time to time. There was a time in my life when I was convinced that I could be an assassin, hired killer like John Wick, even if I didn't know of him back then, or a mercenary, you know, like 18 but neither smoking cigars, covered in gold, nor afraid of planes. Whichever the one of them really, I was sure I'd make a great one. I knew I would be capable of earning my living by removing others. Silently, smartly, never to be found. Now, naturally, being a naive young shit that I was, I romanticized that I would be a Grim Reaper with a conscience, and that I would only ever take jobs hunting bad guys. I would refuse the others, and that everyone would be fine and dandy with that choice on my side. Today, I know that you can't really pick your jobs if you work for someone, and when you're a freelance, you can probably get picky only when you reach a level at which you're recognized in quote-unquote business. Still, I was stupid, and naturally I know now that I wouldn't make a good cold hard killer. For that matter, I wouldn't make a bad one either. But even if my mercenary/assassin career was impossible to achieve in real life, it doesn't mean that I could not dabble in it in the world of virtual entertainment. So, Jagged Alliance Deadly Games, a standalone expansion of the earlier Jagged Alliance and one more focused on a mercenary work rather than Country of Metavira and centered around its plot, was a perfect choice. And in many ways, it was also a perfect game. For a dumb young myself raised on action movies and comic books, even more so. It's probably also a reason why I preferred this over the original. But other than the shift from the story-driven gameplay to a linear mercenary missions, they were very similar. You still got to hire your crew of mercenaries from different characters from around the world, and then lead them through more and more demanding missions. Each of the missions had a set number of turns to complete, which is not something I particularly enjoy in my games, as it forces me to play either more aggressive or less safely than I'd like, or stop treating them like missions altogether, and more like tactical puzzles that I'd have to solve before even taking a first turn. Fortunately, Deadly Games is so well put together and fun that I just allowed myself to forfeit a bit of care and take the missions as they were coming, not kneeling or hiding behind cover each and every time I ended my turn, and still have fun. Dozens of different in terms of stats and character mercenaries, often with pre-existing rapport and opinions about each other, as many weapons and gear as I could dream about, and varied mission types, lured me in and kept me virtually fulfilling that stupid dream of mine for hours on end. Now, it's worth pointing out that deadly games could also be played in co-op multiplayer, which for a veteran of co-op XCOM such as myself sounds like a dream come true, but I've not had a chance to experience it with anyone else, and while it will no doubt be hella fun, it's something I can't really tell you about here. Screamer 2 is an arcade racer that at the time of its release was universally loved as it was genuinely fantastic. It features 4 fictional rally cars, each of them feeling unique and behaving differently on a track. Following the typical for the races formula of the easier to drive the particular car is, the slower its max speed, and the more challenging one is to keep in the lane, the faster it can go. Not that there were any lanes in it, but you get what I mean. It may not seem like a lot of choice, just 4, but given the pure fun factor, you never really feel as something was missing when playing. And if you compare it to classics like Outrun, then 4 are like 400% more, and that sounds like a lot, don't it? The tracks are all different from one another too and spread across the entire world, so you may as well be going through a British small town and countryside, ship and all, as well as dry sands of Egypt, raising clouds of dust, or slippery snows of Finland barely holding on to the road. It was great. Screamer 2 had phenomenal graphics, great sound design, and was so action-packed that nothing in the arcade racing genre on PC could realistically compare to it. It was arguably one of the better racers of 1996 and remains one for me to this very day. But all those undoubtedly amazing features are still not the reason why it's so important to me. I loved and love it because I have sentimental memories attached to it of playing it semi-competitively against my father for a better part of 1 year in the 90s. We didn't play Screamer 2 in split screen despite it being included, as it didn't offer high enough frame rate to do so on our home PC in that mode. But each of us raced on his own, and then the game would save our times and we would try to beat each other's scores, as it felt if we were playing some kind of a mental challenge in which whomever got to the first spot would get to rule the castle. This particular castle being our household. It goes without saying that even if I won occasionally, I had no saying in how things were or weren't at home. I was cheated out of my rule if you ask me. Anyway, we would try out different strategies that we came up with, like cutting corners fast or late, not all of them, only those that were worthy, manual switching for those fractions of a second differences for perfect gear changes, different control schemes, with my father famously within our 4 walls, moving acceleration and brake to one side of the keyboard and steering to another, playing two-handed as opposed to using default arrows control scheme. And many, many, many more, some better, some worse. And whenever one of us managed to overtake another, he would gloat for as long as the record was not broken. It was great. Ultimately, despite my best effort, he was better than I. I feel that I may have had much more fun, and I definitely remember it to this day and know for a fact that his memory of the time is heavily distorted. I mean, he's convinced that we played it on the Amiga using joysticks. So, while Screamer 2 is a top-notch racer, it's not it alone that's the reason for me considering it one of my faves of 1996, it's the sentiment. It seems that everyone loved Duke Nukem 3D. So there should be nothing special about it, right? And I'm just one of the many, and we're all sheep following one shepherd, 3D Realms. But no, that's not the case here whatsoever. Duke 3D is a special game, and everyone who loved it for a reason, and if anything, we're all shepherds and none of us was sheep. Or that's what I'd like to hope for at least. Still, what is it and why I liked it so much to consider it one of my faves of 1996, especially that I'm not really an FPS player? Well, first of all, hail to the king, baby! Secondly, Duke 3D is a sci-fi themed fun and full of dark humor and tons of pop culture references 2.5D first-person shooter. It's set in a futuristic LA that's been invaded by the aliens and is struggling against them. Although, if I'm to be honest, from where I stand, it looks like LA gave up long time ago, as there's no real police or military, and all you really ever get to face in the game are the various kinds of nasty aliens. So, when there's something strange in the neighborhood, when there's something weird and it don't look good, who you gonna call? Ghost, but no one, cause it's you who's gonna be called to come and deal with it. And your 28-level strong adventure of eradication of aliens invading LA, filled with one-liners galore, will take you on an ass-kicking adventure straight from the streets of the city through dozens of differently themed locales. You lay your boot to the aliens' asses, one kick to the tooth at a time. Especially that some of them look like a failed Cold War-era Soviet experiments, being half-men, half-pigs, while others are more akin to skinny and wimpy predators torn out of their hunter's armors and devoid of their iconic weapons. But what made me care about Duke 3D were not even the amazing weapons, not the one-liners, though I loved them for the first 10-15 times I heard them all, and not the undoubtedly fun-designed aliens I got to be killed by. I mean, kill. I got to kill. That's right, cause no interstellar scum is going to be chasing me down. Nope, the reason was a twofold. First of all, excellent level design, which for the first time in any FPS that I played to date made me want to explore every nook and cranny, look for hidden areas and made progressing so much more fun. Even more so because some level elements were very dynamic and felt really modern, like destructible walls or parts of the floor falling down in response to an explosion somewhere. Sure, many of them, nay, most of them were scripted, but it really didn't change how action-packed the game felt. And second reason is same as with many other games I've spoken about so far, multiplayer. Now, to make things clear, I am not an avid FPS player as I suck at them. So by extension of that, I don't really play those in multiplayer either. But there are some notable exceptions, and as you probably might have already guessed, Duke Nukem 3D was one. I never played it with more than one person at the time, but those few games that I played against my buddy back then were some of the most fun deathmatch experiences that I've ever had. Partly because Duke was my first multiplayer FPS experience, and partly because it was amazingly crafted and the earlier mentioned level design was stellar and worked as good in single as it did in multiplayer environment. I remember one time hiding somewhere, camping, checking the cameras all the time, trying to snipe that buddy of mine who seemingly disappeared, just to have him jump out from behind and shoot me point blank in the back of my head. Because while I was looking for him, he was following me stealthily every step of the way, so that whenever I checked the cameras, they didn't spot him as he was not far, well hidden, just a step or two behind. It was incredible and super fun. For both of us, shooter and the shootee. Duke Nukem 3D was an amazing game, and it kinda still is, if you keep your expectations in check. Tomb Raider is arguably one of the most important games of not only 1996 but gaming overall, and definitely in my top 10 for the year. It was the first full 3D third-person perspective arcade adventure title that gained such a huge, cult-like following. I suppose it can be in large part attributed to the overflowing protagonist Miss Lara Croft and her busty chest. But if I was to simplify it to just that, I would be doing this game a disservice. Sure, given the amount of polygons available at the time, Lara definitely looks like a woman, if she was cut down from a log of wood without skill or care. But she's also a charismatic, interesting Indiana Jones-like character that stands on her own merit. Come to think of it, her charming British character and undeniable triangle-boobed looks were one of the three main reasons for Tomb Raider's immense success, the other two being level design and gameplay. The first one was truly a sight to behold, well, perhaps it isn't anymore, but in 1996 it was awakening imaginations of billions of players who got the arcade Indiana Jones game that they always wanted but never had a chance to experience before, be it because of technical limitations or lack of imagination on the dev side. And gameplay, believe it or not, was even better. In this new, expertly executed full 3D environment, Lara could easily run around, jump, climb, swim and fight with hundreds of enemies big and small, from tiny but annoying SF bats to T-Rexes and anything in between. And all those moves of her were so fluid, so lifelike, most of us couldn't believe it to be real. And anyone who could run it at reasonable frame rates at the time played the game, whether they liked the arcade titles or not. The very first time I saw Tomb Raider was at my late friend's house. We were both living like 3 minutes apart, so naturally we would hang out quite often, a lot of times while playing games. And Tomb Raider, that I somehow managed to overlook in all the gaming mags that I used to purchase back then, enchanted me on the first glance. And no, I don't mean the boobs were second or third glance at best. Also important, no doubt about that, just not as much as the first. So, he had this game I somehow ignored for months, sitting there on his PC, running super smoothly in high-res, and it was everything that I wanted from an action-adventure experience and more. And I fell for it. I had to have it. And I did, soon after. So you can only imagine my disappointment learning at home that if I wanted Lara to run as smooth as her polygon-based body would allow her, I had to play in low res. Now, PlayStation owners can relate to that, cause it didn't support high res on their machine either, but seeing it first in glorious 640x480, just to then have it cut in half on both axes at home, was a bit disheartening. Still, if you think that it discouraged me from playing, you're wrong. Lara was incredible heroine, her game was super fun to experience, an Indiana Jones-like dream come true for me that I played for hours on end. Not cause I replayed it so often, but because I sucked. It didn't stop me from playing and trying time after time again to get that little bit further. Today, without a shred of a doubt, I consider it to be one of my absolute faves of 1996. I believe I've said more than once by now in these videos of mine that I don't play sports or football games, or at least not anymore. Well, unless they're very unusual interesting sports or multi-event compilations that I can treat like Olympics to experience against friends. Yeah, friends. Who am I kidding here, right? It's just me and my cat here. Anyway, football managers are a notable exception, as I'm also oddly attracted to series of numbers, big tables filled with them to the brim, and the whole spending of 10 hours of hard work to gain 1% increase in performance gameplay that they are all based on. And Ultimate Soccer Manager 2 was my favorite. Let me tell you why. And to do that, we have to jump back in time, I mean even more than to 1996, few years earlier, and land on the Amiga. Or next to it, we don't want to damage the historic unit after all. So the first football manager that I really got lost in was the Manager on the Amiga. It may have not been the most numbers-filled wet dream of a lone accountant most of these are, but it was a nice mix of approachable with features, and most of all hot seat multiplayer, which as you know makes most games better. And I played it with two cousins of mine to death. And what I mean by that is that when we would see each other a few times a year at most, as we were living quite far apart, we would start the Manager up on day 1 and play it to late night hours of day 2 non-stop. After which on day 3 morning, those of us who were visiting the other would eat breakfast, pack up and travel back home. And it was something like a 3+ hours worth of travel, my friends, so no joke for a young kid. Still, the multiplayer was what kept us going, it was glorious and well worth all that lost sleep. Well, until first Ultimate Soccer Manager that came out on the Amiga a couple or so years later. It was that and so much more. The matches had a very visual representation, you could make tons of tactical and strategic changes during them, and everything else in the management was lifted to new heights. So it became our next obsession. Granted, we didn't see each other often, and in the meantime each of us would play their own private games at home, but when we did meet up, it was all about multiplayer, about reaching the highest spot in the league. Well, tons of sugary sweets and sodas too, but mainly the game. So, when I finally moved to PC and learned of Ultimate Soccer Manager 2, I was hooked. And same as with its predecessor as compared to the Manager, this too was like a monumental upgrade on the first one. Everything that made the game great was lifted in this one, features were added, and putting the game down if you sat at it for an hour seemed nigh impossible. It was not the easiest experience at the first look, but as soon as you grasp it after that hour or so, it was very difficult to stop playing. And that uncanny addictiveness of it makes it one of my faves of 1996. Same way everyone knows of Duke Nukem 3D, everyone knows of Quake. They came out in the same year and they represented entirely different ways of approaching the FPS genre. First was made for fun and for fun alone. And because of that, its enchanting quality of all of its building blocks was undeniable. And many of us come back to it to this very day. To relax, to complete it once more, or, and that's a valid reason too, for shits and giggles. But Quake, well, Quake banked on dark and gothic sci-fi atmosphere, jump scares and well, changing the world forever. And I don't mean the game world, I mean our own. And that, I think, was the reason, or part of the reason, why it's so dear to me. Quake was the first real 3D FPS. And by real, I mean real, as in not only levels but also objects, weapons, enemies and even your own character were all 3D, had place in its 3D world and responded to it as if they were really there. I mean, sure, the times were what they were and it was not the near photorealistic 3D that we're used to today, but at the time Quake looked like future and made all the other games in the genre instantly began feeling dated. And the fact that it was green, mostly dark, lit only by a small light source here and there, and filled with terrifying monstrosities to the brim only made it more breathtaking. And scary, but mostly breathtaking. The other reason for its inclusion in this list is a bit more personal and perhaps not as universal because of that, but when I played Quake first, I often played it with a friend after school. I mean, not like you think, so not in multiplayer, even if it was one of the first shooters to introduce it over the internet rather than LAN, but alternating at one PC, switching between the stages, or when one of us was killed. We would stock up on candy bars and salty snacks and play Quake for a few good hours each day until we've finally beaten it. And while that friend of mine was not perhaps my best friend at any point, and he's not someone I have contact with anymore, the time, the game and the experience made it all special to me in an oddly melancholic way. Also, you're this super soldier who's saving the world by defeating monsters hailing from another dimension that overrun your base, which is always fun, because in real life, I'm more of a rubber duck than the force to be reckoned with. The Elder Scrolls Daggerfall is a first-person role-playing, a second in incredibly popular today Elder Scrolls series, and the biggest role-playing game world to date. For games not set in space, that is. And I mean it, it's still the biggest. it's as big as real-world Great Britain. So while you may be like, but that's not big at all, I mean there are so many bigger countries in the world. To which all I can say, try walking it on foot, we'll see how small Great Britain is. Anyway, Daggerfall takes place in the provinces of Heimrock and Hammerfell of Tamriel, and it's titled after High Rock's capital city. Like with most Bethesda's games, you can be sure of 3 things. First, that it released full of bugs, it did, and it actually took several patches originally to get the game to the point where it would not hang seemingly on random. Secondly, that it's an open-ended title that allows for complete freedom of choice of where to go and what to do next, and does not require you to follow the main storyline whatsoever. And it's also something that it fulfilled as expected. And finally, you can bet that the game is big. But I've mentioned that already, so by this point in the video, it's old news. There is a lot I can say about Daggerfall, and a lot that I actually did. I mean, if you go back to one of my other videos covering the year, like, I don't know, maybe the 25 Essential DOS Games of 1996, I give it justice there I feel, but here we're not to talk about what it is, but why it's within my 10 faves for the year. And the answer is surprisingly simple and totally not what you expect. I think at least, cause I wouldn't expect it in this form from anyone else either. So why do I love Daggerfall with a passion of an otaku falling for his mobile phone gaming waifu in some kind of an obscure pay-to-win action-packed JRPG? Well, because I've never finished it. In fact, I was never even close. And yes, I shit you not, that's the reason. Well, the very base of a reason really, but one nonetheless. The fact that I failed for whatever the reason didn't discourage me at all, as what I loved about Daggerfall was how many times I could retry, crafting my own new characters, picking between numerous Tamriel's races, 18 pre-made classes and tons upon tons of primary and secondary skills, or I could even make my own class, that is, and decide what it would be about. And each character that I played with felt different, and the adventures ahead of me appeared to be allowing me to approach them in often unique ways depending on who I was in the game. And it's that freedom of choice of who I could be and how I could experience the non-linear and gigantic world is what made it one of my most favorite games. So, if you've never played it, I wholeheartedly recommend failing at Daggerfall a few times, because it's a real fun time to be head gaming. Also, combat sucked in this one, there's no reason to dance around it, melee was just dog shit and I'm glad that they've remade it in future entries. I think I'm gonna start and end this one with everything that I have to say about the reasons for its inclusion in this video, and I know it's not the approach I would usually take, but it is what it is. It's rather late, I've not slept good for months by now, so yeah, I love Death Rally. I have very fond memories of it, playing it with my youngest sister and a friend and having a blast of a time doing so. It's a top-down arcade-style racer that's very similar in its design to Micro Machines or supercars, but expanding considerably upon what these two offered. For one, you don't only win the races by being the first, you can win by being the only one left driving. Because as the title may have given it away, there is much more to Death Rally than just racing. There's plenty of death too, like definitely more than it's necessary. It features weapons active and passive and 4 different levels of car upgrades, engine to increase the top speed, tires that improve traction and reduce drifting, and armor that reduces incoming damage of all kinds. Before each race, if only you can afford it, you can buy those and also mines and rocket fuel. But your opponents are not sleeping content with what they drive either, and they're preparing for the races as well. The game offers 19 tracks and 6 cars, each next better than the previous, all obviously upgradable. There are 4 cars in each race, and only the first 3 earn money for it, the last one goes home with nothing. Well, to be precise, damaged car, repair costs, debt, and nothing. If he/she/any other appropriate pronoun survives, that is. While racing, you get to pick up ammo recharges, rocket fuel refills, and money drops popping up on each track, and whomever picks them up first gets to keep or use them. Monetary bonuses picked up from races depend on the car that you're driving, and the better the car, the more you will get. All the shooting and mines aside, your ultimate goal is to get to the top of the championship table and defeat the boss driver, your adversary, nay, your nemesis, on the last special track. And while winning is fun, Death Rally is one of those games where the road to it is more fun than the destination itself. And it's all fine and dandy, but like I initially mentioned, it's that multiplayer experience that I had with my sister and a buddy of mine, separate games I must add, is what made it special. Cause Death Rally is a game of skills as much as it's a game of luck. For instance, you may be happy and content that you just nearly put that opponent of yours out of commission while racing and got so far ahead of them zooming away, sure of your winnings, that they would surely not be able to catch up. When suddenly they manage to pick up rocket fuel, extra ammo, and not only catch up to you, but leave you slow and with smoke coming out of your near wreck, far behind them. So, even if one of you is clearly a better gamer, in Death Rally it doesn't guarantee a win, as luck plays a role too. Rubber banding in a most natural and also unexpected way. And that memory of that time, while rather competitive spirit-filled, is still very dear to me. So, what do you think of my 1996 choices? Do you have reasons for any of them to be particularly close to your heart? Or maybe your picks would be entirely different and for other, deeper reasons? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.